In the previous lecture, we created a raised button and changed its apparent features. Also, we defined an onClick event for the raised button. In this lecture, we are going to work with flat buttons. To create a flat button, I open the activity main layout. Inside the layout, I define another AppCompat button. I type android.support.v7.widget.appcompat button. My AppCompat button requires a height and a width. In the previous section, I set its height and width to wrap content. You see that an AppCompat button has been created for me. After height and width, I'm going to define an ID for it. @+ID/ I set its ID to flat_btn. Also, I type Android:\layout_center horizontal, and I set its value to true. You see that my AppCompat button was positioned horizontally at the center of the screen. And I type Android:\layout_below. My second button should be placed under the first one. So I enter its ID @ID/raised_btn. You see that my second button was placed under the first one. Now I define a margin top for my button, Android:\layout_margin top, and I set its value to, for example, 24 dp. After margin, I define a text for it. For example, I type the title of my button as flat button. I press Alt and Enter, extract string resource, and OK. So far, we created another AppCompat button. Now I'm going to show you how to transform your button to a flat button, which means a button having only a title and no background. I open styles.xml, and for my second AppCompat button, I create a new style. I open a style tag, select a name for my style, for example, flat button. I set its parent to widget.appcompat.button.borderless, which means a button from the AppCompat library with no background. And I close my style. Now I return to the activity main layout and I define a style for my second AppCompat button. After the text attribute, I type style equals and I reference the style that I have created for the second AppCompat button. @style/flat button. As you can see, our button no longer has a background and our AppCompat button transformed into a flat button. Now let's see our flat button on the emulator. Alright, our application was launched on the emulator. You see that we created a flat button. If I click on this flat button, you see the nice effect of material buttons. Now I want to define a color as well as an on-click event for this flat button. Okay, I stop my emulator and I open the file colors.xml. Inside the file, I'm going to create a new color. I name it color flat button. I close the color and for its value, I go to material colors. For example, I select the blue color. Okay, I copy the color code for 500, I return to Android Studio, and I paste the code inside color flat button. So I created a new color and gave it a value from material colors. I close colors.xml and open styles.xml. Like raised buttons, I'm going to add the Android: text color item inside my flat buttons style. So I open an item tag and I type Android: text color and I close the item. For its value, I enter the color that I created in colors.xml, @color/color flat button. Okay, I'm done with styles.xml. Now I return to the activity main layout. Yes, as you can see, our flat button's color is now blue, the color that we selected for it. There's only one more thing. We must define an event or functionality for this button. I close the activity main layout and open the main activity class. In order to define a functionality for our flat button, we must do exactly what we did for the raised button. So inside the main activity class, I'm going to create an object from the AppCompatButton class. I name my object, for example, flatButton, and semicolon. Inside the onCreate method, I get the reference for my object. In this section, I type flatButton equals, I use casting syntax for AppCompatButton, then I type findViewById r.id.flat_btn and semicolon. After connecting my object, I define the method setOnClickListener for my object. So I type flatButton.setOnClickListener, and inside the parentheses, I type new onClickListener. You see that the onClick method was added to our class. When we click on our flat button, the code inside the onClick method will be executed for us. Depending on your project, you can enter your desired code and statements inside this method. In order to see whether the onClick method works, I'm going to use a toast message. Toast.makeText. Inside the parentheses, I need to pass a context. I type getApplicationContext. For its text, I enter flat button. And I set the toast duration to length short. And finally, I type .show. Now if I click the flat button, a toast message with the text flat button must appear. I run my project on the emulator. Alright, the app was launched on the emulator. I click the flat button. And yes, as soon as I clicked the button, the onClick method was executed and the toast message showed up. Thanks for being with us in this lecture. In the next lecture, we will be creating a floating action button. So stay with us.